Okay, everyone, we are going to begin. I want to welcome you to another wonderful CLASSICOPIA concert at this incredible space. We want to thank Dr. Andy Bauman for letting us into his home one more time. Thank you. We've had several great concerts here, and we thank you for coming out, and you will not be disappointed by the music you hear tonight. It's music that most of you probably don't know a lot of these composers. They are not very well known, but should be better known. But because they were women, a lot of their music was not considered strong enough to be part of the repertoire. And because they were women, they had to deal with a lot of bad ideas from men. And I'm going to read a couple quotes about what men thought women should be able to do. Here's one from Havelock Ellis in 1870. He says, "Music is at once the most emotional and the most severely abstract of the arts. There is no art to which women have been more widely attracted, and there is no art in which they have shown themselves more completely helpless." George Upton, in another book around the same time called Women in Music, which you might think is a good book about women in music, but it's about women that were muses to men who composed music. And he wrote in it, "Not only are women too emotional and lacking in stamina to write music, but a woman's mind simply cannot grasp the scientific logic of music making." And worst of all is from a very famous conductor Hans von Bülow, whose wife was stolen by Richard Wagner, so that was good. But he did say the following: "Reproductive genius can be admitted to the pretty sex, but productive genius unconditionally cannot. There will never be a woman composer, at best a misprinting copyist. I do not believe in the feminine form of the word creator." So of course, with all this, it's astounding that these women were able to do anything. Amy Fay, who is a well-known pianist, she said it best. She said, "Women have been too much taken up with helping and encouraging men instead of placing a proper value on their own talent, which they are too prone to underestimate and to think not worth making the most of." Now, this is a rather insidious thing because many women composers like Fanny Mendelssohn and Clara Schumann began to doubt themselves because they thought there were no women composers, even though there had been many women composers. They just had been forgotten by history. But Clara Schumann, in her diary of 1838, after she had written some amazing pieces at the age of 15 and 16, decided that she should really stop composing. She said, "I once believed that I had creative talent, but I have given up on this idea. A woman should not wish to compose. There never was one able to do it. Am I intended to be the one? It would be arrogant to believe that. May Robert always create. That must make me happy." So we just have a litany of terrible things that have happened to these women, the doubt within. So it's great when we can actually play some of this music and show there are amazing women composers. And we're going to begin with a woman who, again, is not well known. Her name is Hélene Liebmann. She was born Hélene Ries in Berlin in 1796. And unfortunately, she would die at the age of 34. So she was a rather young lady when she died. We don't have that much written by her, about 13 or 14 pieces. What we do know is that she was an astounding pianist who at the age of 10 performed in Berlin and amazed audiences who heard her. And she decided she also wanted to start composing at that time, so she wrote her Opus 1 piano sonata when she was 12 years old, and it was performed. And then she followed that very quickly with all of her other works. So most of the works that we know that she wrote were all written before she was 17 years old. And then she got married at 18, and as far as we know, she never wrote another note after that. So she went off to Vienna and to London with her husband, and we just lose sight of anything she had done. So these women really had to compose early on if they were going to get anything done. And this is an astounding piece. I believe it was written when she was 16 years old. She studied with Ferdinand Ries, who had been a student of Beethoven. But what's really cool about this piece, although it's written in 1814, right at the beginning of the Romantic period, it really sounds more like the classical period music. It sounds like Mozart and Haydn. But what was lacking in pieces by Mozart and Haydn, if you ever play piano trios, cellists never want to play that music because their parts are really boring. Mozart and Haydn didn't really think of the cello as a melodic instrument, so it would just go boom, for many measures at a time, and it's not the most exciting music. Every once in a while they'll have some melodies. But Liebmann saw the cello as a far more melodic instrument, and so what's great in this piece is there's a great back and forth between the violin and the cello. The dialogue that goes on is fantastic. It's really one of the few classical pieces where the cello gets to shine, so we really want to point that out. She, of course, was a great pianist, so there's a lot of piano in this as well. But it really is a fun piece of music. And in fact, it was reviewed when it came out in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung, the most famous journal there in Berlin. The reviewer actually started out his article by saying that he was dreading having to review ladies' music, as he wrote, and that he thought it was going to be saccharine and awful. But he actually, after hearing it, he stated, "This music warrants comparison with the early compositions of many of the great masters." So he saw in it something great. I do think it's a wonderful piece. It's in 3 movements, really sprightly first movement, a beautiful lyrical second movement, and the third movement is a polonaise. A polonaise is a kind of a Polish dance made famous by Chopin, usually having a little dotted rhythm, bum, 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 and you'll hear that all the way through as she plays this one melody that keeps coming back with lots of different journeys away from it. It's a really fun movement. So this is Hélene Liebmann's Grand Trio in A Major, Opus 11. Please welcome Francis and Emmanuel Borowsky. Well, pretty good for a person you never heard from. Yeah. Oh, I just find them. I don't know. It does some research. There's a lot of people that you find that are amazing. So I can't remember how I first came across her. Your mom played one of her pieces at some point, like a cello piece, and then I thought that was pretty good, and then sort of did some research, and it's a great piece of music, and it never gets played. So I don't know what to tell you. Yes. It takes more and more women, like publishing companies. There's one called Hildegard now that is devoted to publishing women's music, and so you're getting more and more out there. A lot of this stuff was sort of lost in libraries somewhere in Germany for many years, and so it's only been sort of recently printed out that we were able to get this. But it takes a lot to sort of find all this stuff, and then this next one, you're going to be blown away by as well. We're going to let Emmanuel take a rest and let Francis showcase this incredible work, a cello sonata. It was written in 1904, and it really is a remarkable piece of music that sounds like no other piece that we've played. Just crazy harmonies every once in a while, but beautifully put together. And the composer's name is Mélanie Bonis. She went by Mel as a first name to try to pretend to be a man, and she was able to get some music published that way. She has a fascinating, besides the music being great, her life story is better than a Telemundo soap opera, so I'm going to give it to you. It's a really incredible story. Born in 1858, she lived a fairly long life, would die not until 1937. But she grew up in a very conservative religious home, and the father did not really want her playing music. He thought that would be bad, too emotional for her. But her mom was an amateur pianist, and she started taking lessons, and apparently got quite good. But at the time she was 12 or 13, they had a family friend named César Franck, who was a very important composer. And Franck at some point came and heard her, and he said, "This is a remarkable talent. She needs to be in the conservatory." The father of the Paris Conservatory. She couldn't go there, of course, to be a composer because there was no such thing as a woman composer, but she could go as a pianist and learn about harmony and theory and such. So she actually goes for 1 year to the Paris Conservatory at the same time that Claude Debussy is just beginning. They share classes together, and she wins first prize in harmony over Debussy. But sadly, she did not last long in conservatory because she fell in love with a singer, which is always a dangerous thing to do. And his name was Amédée Hettich was his name. He was a poet and a singer, and this was her first time away from her family, and I think she just fell madly in love with this guy. And the father discovered it and immediately took her out of the conservatory. After a year she was there and married her off to a man 25 years older than she was, a guy named Albert Domange, who had 5 sons already. His wife had died, so she became Madame Domange, and she actually had 2 more sons with her husband. And she lived this incredibly a life that from the outside looked like she was the perfect bourgeois lady. She had 3 different homes and took care of the kids, lived very stately kind of life. But on certain summers, she would have to go to Switzerland for the waters there, for the cleansing waters, and Mr. Hettich would join her in Switzerland. And they kept this sort of torrid love affair going for several years after she got married, until the point that she had a child with Mr. Hettich. And she somehow was able to keep this child from the husband. I don't know how long that was able to, but she gave birth to this child and left this girl, her name was Madeline, in Switzerland with a chambermaid as kind of her foster parent, and would go back sometimes to see her, but she was sort of not part of the family, left over there. And this went on for about 16 years or so as Madeline grew up. The husband dies at the beginning of World War I in 1914, and one of their sons that they had had together, Edward, had gone off to fight in the war. He had gotten injured and needed time to recuperate. He came back and was living at the house with his mom. Meanwhile, Madeline's foster mother died in Switzerland, and so Mel Bonis thought, I can't leave her over there by herself. I can bring her into the home and I'll pretend I'll be her godmother and she can live with us. So that went on for a couple months until Madeline fell madly in love with her brother, Edward. And we're going to have a great affair until the mother said, you cannot do that, he is your brother. So it's an amazing story. I would imagine that there were some words yelled at some point between mother and daughter, but they actually became very close after this. Madeline was a fairly good pianist, apparently, and helped her mother publish some of her music. But it's just an amazing story, and the music tells it all. that that you can hear in this music so much passion and so much turmoil inside that it was clearly within her that she needed to let it out in her music. And her music was played in her life. There was a whole society of French music, and her pieces were performed. So she was not unknown while she was alive, but then sort of fell out of complete recognition. And it's really only been, again, your mom who played this piece for me at some point. We played it together, and it was such a great piece. And I discovered that Bonis has written 3 or 4 different quintets and quartets. There's a lot of music out there that is yet to be found, but I want you to hear this piece because it's just a beautiful, beautiful work. And again, it has moments where it sounds like Debussy, a lot of what we call whole tone scales. It sounds a little bit like Mahler at times. There's just this whole beginning part of the 20th century. And I think she was so creative in her harmony because she didn't have a teacher telling her that was wrong. And that's one of the good things about not having been taught. She tried out things that I don't think other people might have tried because they're very strange harmonies, but they really work. Especially there's a beautiful second movement, one of the most beautiful slow movements I've ever played, where the harmonies just kind of meander and wander, but end up in a beautiful place. There's a great first movement where we start off slow and then build into some faster parts. And then there's a beautiful third movement, lots of back and forth in that. At some point in the third movement, everything sort of comes to a stop and you hear kind of like raindrops on the piano, these very interesting falling, sighing lines in there. And then we sort of hear a return to the slow movement as well. And then we end with a crazy fast end that should be fantastic. So we will play this piece, and then we have some wonderful food and drink supplied by Andy. Love to talk to you back there. And then we have a great second half as well. So here's the Cello Sonata by Mélanie Bonis.